Welcome to APHA's Addressing the COVID-19 Crisis, an open forum webinar series for pharmacy. Today we'll be doing a review of recent updates, and my name is Sandra Leal. I am the president of the American Pharmacists Association. In this webinar, we will be discussing the latest information on COVID-19 vaccine recommendations, including the efficacy, protection, and timing for boosters and additional doses, as well as what to expect about the Novax COVID-19 vaccine. We have two incredible speakers that are joining us today. We have John Grabenstein, who serves as Director for the Scientific Communications with the Immunization Action Coalition and is the President of Vaccine Dynamics. John is a globally recognized vaccinologist, pharmacist, and epidemiologist. He has written more than 300 articles and 11 books, primarily on topics of immunization, public health, and leadership. He's focused on programs, implementation, and interpersonal dynamics. He was awarded the APhA Foundation 2022 Remington Honor Medal, the most distinguished award in pharmacy. Thank you, John, for joining us. We also have with us today Steve Foster, and Steve is APHA's former liaison representative to ACIP. He retired as captain from the U.S. Public Health Service in 1998 as a professor from the University of Tennessee College of Pharmacy in 2016. He is a national faculty and writer for APHA's pharmacy-based immunization certificate training program and has been a featured speaker and author in many immunization education programs. Dr. Foster has personally trained thousands of pharmacists as immunizers, and through his work with student pharmacists has facilitated vaccination of more than 10,000 Tennesseans. We also have with us today Mitch Rothfuls. He's the Chief of Governance and State Affiliates. He is also APHA's Executive Director of the APhA Foundation and brings a long history at APhA as our vaccine expert. We also have with us today Dan Zlot, who's the Senior Vice President of Education and Business Development at APHA, and he brings 10 years of experience at NIH as an oncology infectious disease specialist. And with us today, we also have Mike Baxter, who is the APHA Senior Director of Regulatory Policy. Thanks for joining us today. So we will review the format for today's webinars. We will have what we just had, the introductions, and then we will have our discussion with John and Steve for about half an hour, and then we will open the forum for discussion. So as you hear anything, please share your questions and your thoughts in the toolbar. And then at 1:50, we will review APHA's ongoing activities and what's coming up. All right, with that, let me just remind you, we have the GoToWebinar, so you could add your questions. We want to make sure we get as many of your comments and questions answered today. We also have the reference, the handout and the resource toolbar. You can download that and reference that later. And then we will make a recording of this webinar available to you once it is concluded. I will invite John and Steve to join us. If you can turn on your camera. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you again. I know you both are frequent flyers here with our updated information, as you are both vaccine experts, and definitely wanted to learn a little bit more about Novavax. We've learned so much about the other vaccines and what's going on. But let's start with you, John. We've heard about Novavax COVID-19 vaccine for a while now, but it hasn't been authorized in the United States yet. And this authorization can be right around the corner. What should the audience expect with this vaccine?
Thanks, Sandra, and thanks for having us on again. So I have on this slide a summary of what we know of the product. Well, first we'll start with the synonyms. Not quite sure how to pronounce the trade name, Novax. I'm not sure where to put the accent, whether it's Nuvaxovid or Nuvaxovid, but we'll find that out eventually. They're producing it in the United States. They're also producing it in India, where it'll have a different brand name. But presumably they'll get EUA status, and the FDA doesn't permit brand names when it's in EUA status, so it'll be the Novavax COVID-19 vaccine, just like Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna's with that phrase. It's a spike protein subunit vaccine, so it's just an isolated piece of the virus, and some people are looking forward to that. So it's not there's nothing wrong with an mRNA vaccine or an adenovirus vaccine, but there's a little sliver of the pie who wants to see a standard, more routine vaccine, and this would be one. It has an adjuvant, which is a new one relative to the United States, called Matrix M. It's a saponin adjuvant it's extracted from the bark of a tree, and with some cholesterol and some lipids, it forms little cages, little micro particles that help boost the immune response to the vaccine. It's made in insect cells. It's SF9, or is a kind of worm or moth, depending on what stage you're in. That's been transformed with a virus, a baculovirus. That's similar to Sanofi's Flublok influenza vaccine. So that technology is a more traditional kind of technology. It's a suspension, 5 micrograms of the protein, 50 micrograms of the adjuvant, a 0.5 ml dose, 15,000 person phase 2 trial, a 30,000 person phase 3 trial, and the results have been out for a while. The company's been working on its manufacturing consistency and has that standardized now and uniform, and is filed the package of the data package with the FDA at the end of January. So we sort of thought we might be seeing movement towards an FDA meeting for this product as of now. Didn't quite, it may take another week or two, who knows, another few weeks, but it's certainly moving along. 2-dose product, 0.5 ml volume, intramuscular, 18 and above would be the first, presumably the first use of the product. It's being used around the world, Canada, Australia, Europe, etc. And so that's would be our 4th vaccine once the FDA gives the green light.
Well, it sounds like this one's very plant-based, so that's another good option there. So let's talk a little bit about the other, we have several vaccine options. How is this one going to be a little different? Like, what's the protection against the variants, and in combination with influenza?
So faithful attenders of these webinars will recognize this slide format that we used some months ago when Janssen's vaccine first came out. You can see this is a comparison contrast slide. This is the first one, that's the protein subunit. A lot of the same, everything in the Novavax column is what I just said. It's a 2-dose product like the mRNA vaccines. It's a liquid suspension. It's probably going to be in multi-dose vials. It's probably not going to have a preservative. We have to wait and see what the exact presentation is. And it's a refrigerable product, so no freezer implications. So the flexibility of that kind of storage conditions obviously is friendly to providers.
Very good. And what do we know about the safety and efficacy of the vaccine? I know you mentioned 2 pretty large-sized trials with it. What's the experience been so far?
Right. So if we can go to the next slide, we will see another comparison contrast. So look over at the Novavax column. So that 30,000, 29,900 and something person trial is looking at 18 to 64-year-olds and 65 plus, and the overall efficacy for moderate to severe disease was 90%. So that's certainly a quite positive finding. Very reasonable confidence intervals. Those calculations started 7 days after the 2nd dose. I found the specific efficacy for the 18 to 64-year-old cohort as 92%. I haven't yet found what the specific numbers are for the 65 plus cohort. It might be 89 or 88 or something like that. But once we'll know that for sure once the FDA releases the briefing package as it reviews the product. The 90% was against any infection. I misspoke. 90%, 90.4% against any COVID-19 infection. 100% against moderate to severe. That's 14 versus 0, right? So it's, not all that many cases, but it's, it's all obviously in the right direction. The fine details are in that New England Journal article that I've got cited there. And I didn't, safety is obviously extremely important. I didn't bother to put a safety slide here because what happens after vaccinations, a headache and malaise and mild temperature rises and all the usual things, and all the usual things happened with Novavax's vaccine. It's in that New England Journal article. Nothing unusual, nothing much different from the vaccines that we've been using for a while. And you'll see on that last line, we have now incredible experience with, in terms of hundreds of millions of doses, only just in the US, let alone hundreds of millions of doses more overseas with the mRNAs, Pfizer and Moderna, with the adenovirus Janssen. It's a smaller, there's less experience with, we should be clear, less experience with Novax because they're just getting geared up. But so far so good, nothing particularly alarming. Will there be myocarditis after this vaccine? Too soon to tell because the numbers are still, 0 out of 30,000 isn't as reassuring as, isn't all that reassuring. It's reassuring, but it's not, it's not 0 out of a million. So, the rare events we have to wait for broader use.
It's incredible to have all of this incredible science in just a short amount of time and different types of vaccine types. So it's
unprecedented, really a tribute to science. I want to make a comment that this is Women's History Month. It's remarkable to me as I have been following all the published articles, how many female authors, female scientists are authors on all sorts of COVID-19 vaccine papers. It's really a fun thing to watch from a women in STEM kind of approach.
Well, we need to catch up on Nobel Prizes here, so I'm sure that this will kind of balance the books on that a little bit. So it's coming.
Fair point.
Well, let's talk a little bit then about effectiveness and boosters, because I know everybody's had a lot of questions around that. So, why bother with the booster doses with Pfizer and Moderna vaccine? What's the value there with the boosters? And, maybe you can address that and then I'll ask you a separate question.
Yeah, this is a slide that they showed at the ACIP meeting back in November. And all medications have risks, and the risks after the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is in Moderna's is comparable. So, but they just showed this one slide. Is in red on the right, and that's principally the myocarditis rate. And there are a few, there are a few cases of myocarditis resulting from vaccination for every million vaccinations delivered. But the benefit, the value, the reason to vaccinate are the blue bars, which obviously are so much bigger in terms of hospitalizations prevented, regardless of age. This is 18 to 29, 30 to 49, 50 to 64, 65 and above. The value of vaccination is the additional protection and the extended protection that you get from the booster dose. And so you want to sustain immunity, maintain immunity, continue the immunity, and the coverage against the variants is also enhanced by getting that third dose, the booster dose, or fourth dose if you're an immunocompromised person.
And I was just going to ask you too. So I know Pfizer and Moderna are seeking approval for vaccine formulations to protect more against the variants. Do you know where things stand with that?
So probably all of the companies have people in their formulations departments working on the formulations of swapping out one variant for the original, and doing some small scale clinical studies. From a public health stance, the difference of the escape, the evasion, the lack of benefit from the variants against vaccine is not sufficient to switch yet. And so, while there's a lot of preparatory work being done, there hasn't been the need to change horses in the middle of the stream, so to speak.
And just get the booster for now.
Fill up your tank. I mean, it's you want to keep up your tetanus immunity, you want to keep up your COVID immunity, all that stuff.
Very good.
Can I also add to that? I think, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but since the variants that come about are not related to the previous variant, they're kind of out there, then it's really hard to predict what a new vaccine would be against another variant until the variant shows up.
Right. I agree. The next slide may have some different data. Thank you. And this is both the mRNA vaccines showing that every time you have vaccinated a few thousand people, or when they're 65 and above, a few hundred people, you've prevented a hospitalization. So this is the positive results of all of your work. And yes, people who are older are more likely to develop serious infection, but those folks in the younger ages can develop serious infections as well.
Yeah, I've been hearing some reports not recommending healthy children to get vaccinated, which I know is not good for public health. So I don't know if you have an impression of that.
I don't know that there's a Florida piece to that story, and I don't know who all is espousing not getting the kids vaccinated. I do know that the Florida chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics says we really do want those young kids to get COVID vaccination, and the Infectious Disease Society of America says agrees fully. So the public health folks, the science, there's not a children's hospital in America that doesn't think those kids should get vaccinated.
Oh, agree. Very good. And I know you have one more slide here of information.
Yeah, the next one's the references for the previous two.
Very good. All right. Well, I'm going to jump over to you, Steve. Thanks, John, for all that wonderful information. I'm going to ask you, Steve, can you review CDC's recommendations for timing of additional doses and booster doses?
Thank you for that beautiful chart in front of me. I'll see what we can do here. I want to just really try to summarize things instead of trying to make it as a reading this chart. But COVID vaccines were initially rolled out with recommendations for 2 doses with the intent of getting the fastest coverage and the highest titer just to slow down the pandemic. Boosters were added later as they followed the titers, things such as the effectiveness data, the variants, hospital bed availability, and many other factors. I suspect that if they had had more time to introduce the vaccines, we probably would have seen series that would have included boosters, such as we see with Tdap, hepatitis, et cetera, with, for example, a 2-shot series a month apart and then a 3rd shot 6 months later. However, the real-life data was used to make these recommendations and these changes. So, in addition to that, also safety data was added to make changes too. So, as this was all happening so quickly, while the changes were very difficult to manage, it was necessary to happen. I also suspect that the Janssen vaccine probably would have been a 2-dose series followed by a booster if it had had more time to study it too. But so now for complicated recommendations, we need a complicated chart. So we'll take a look at this. Starting off with an immune competent patient, the first consideration was age. The Pfizer BioNTech vaccine is approved for ages 5 and older. It's the only vaccine approved for under 18. And there are differing doses for the 5 to 11 age group and the 12 to 17 age group. Then because of newer findings regarding myocarditis with the mRNA vaccines, they extended the interval in certain individuals, which was thought to decrease the incidence of side effects. Therefore, now we have a range of 3 to 8 weeks for these age groups, again, for the Pfizer vaccine. And the Moderna is now 4 to 8 weeks for the same reason. Janssen is still a single dose. And we're still talking about the initial series, the first two injections. And, you're going to have to make a decision what you want to use. Remember, we operate under standing orders, not protocols, so per se. So we're actually can make some medical decisions as we go along with it. But since the 3rd dose was later determined to be needed for the mRNA vaccines, this booster was recommended. Now, again, note that this is not for the 5 to 11-year-old age group. It's for the older 12 up and upgrade. At first, the booster was to be 6 months after the second dose, but then they reduced it to 5 months later based upon new data. Also, a second dose was recommended for the Janssen, or booster dose for the Janssen vaccine, to be given 2 months after their single dose series. Then again, it was initially recommended that the same vaccine be used for the initial series, and they still do recommend that. But then they came up with mix and match, which means that for the booster, you could use a different vaccine as you, whichever you choose to use. And then we complicated it more by saying that the Moderna vaccine was approved at a half dose of the initial series, and this again was brought out, to my understanding, to decrease the incidence of side effects. Now, so again, this slide that you're looking at here is for, it includes the immunocompromised, but we got a better slide on the next one to look at the immunocompromised. But while this is very, back one more second before we go, if you see a lot of these, there's a lot of ors in there. So you have a lot of choices that you can make. And so you do have to practice medicine as a provider and decide exactly what you're going to use based upon this chart. So that was a quick rundown on the first two groups. Let's go on to the next chart then. And this is talking about the moderately and severely immunocompromised group. And now some changes in the recommendations. For these individuals, an additional dose is recommended to be added to the initial series, including the 5 to 11 age group. This additional dose, by the way, is an initial dose to the series. It's not an additional dose or a booster, considered a booster. It's an additional dose to the first series. The first 2 doses of the mRNA vaccines were given at their initial interval of 3 weeks for Pfizer and 4 weeks for Moderna, and not extending these intervals, because with the immunocompromised patients, we want to get as high a titer as we can rapidly. So again, this extension that they talked about of the 3 to 8 weeks or 48 weeks does not extend into these people, the immunocompromised persons. For the Janssen vaccine, the additional dose was in 28 days after the single initial dose. However, the recommendation on that one is that this initial dose is an mRNA vaccine. So either mRNA vaccine can be used for this additional dose, not the Janssen vaccine at that point. Then they added a booster 3 months after that, but it can be with an mRNA vaccine and with the mRNA vaccines, and then the 2 months after the series with the Janssen vaccine. So you're still using the booster, but the intervals again are different. You do have an option to boost with the Janssen vaccine if the first dose in the series was the Janssen vaccine too. So the mRNA vaccine boosters are preferred if an mRNA vaccine is used in the initial series. So as you can see here, this is not something that you can just memorize. This is something that you need to have these charts, and also be aware that the charts are going to be changing as we get more data. So it's something that you got to keep up to date on what's going on. And again, you're looking at the APhA resources here, which are great, and keep after them.
No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the work the staff has done to maintain these. I can't imagine how they're going to fit Novavax in there. These 2 charts, it's already pretty tiny. They're going to need a microscope to zoom them here or make it multi-pages, but it is a lot to keep up on. And so thank you for attending these sessions. This is where we've been trying to do the work of keeping you up to speed on that. Well,
I hope that was a brief, in a short time we've got, but a brief but quick explanation of where they came from. But again, don't base it on what you see here.
And I have a question here, since you briefly spoke about the timing of the second dose and some individuals having a range. Could you review this in a little bit more detail, the timing on the second dose there?
Here's the specific chart that they used for that. So yes, now again, the reason for this was because, and this is again not for let's say first who this is not for. This is not for immunocompromised people. This is not for people over the age of 65. And it's specifically for those people that might potentially develop the myocarditis issue. So by extending the interval a little bit, it was felt like based on some research, that it would possibly decrease the incidence of that. Now again, they don't say automatically go to it. It's not a protocol. It's just that. So you have to work with your patients. It might be a factor of when they can come back. It might be a factor, other factors that go along with it. But talk with them about it. Potentially extending that interval might give them a little bit more protection against that. Again, the The interval is, again, 3 to 8 weeks with Pfizer. It's 4 to 8 weeks with this. But this paragraph below is something that's worth mentioning. The booster doses interval didn't change for this. And again, this is mainly for people who are not immunocompromised, not having the other issues we've talked about. And so it was just found trying to prevent and decrease the potential for the myocarditis issues with the mRNA vaccines.
Very good. And I know you have another slide. We'll go to the next slide.
This is about the same thing. This is just an immunization schedule for COVID from the CDC. I only wanted to mention this because there are other sources. I'm not trying to downplay APhA, but again, there's other sources. It should be verified. If you make a decision, if you can't get answered from one, go to another place. But this is the CDC graph that they use for it. I'm just going to mention that.
Perfect. No, thank you. So I know there's so much information that pharmacists need, but I wanted to ask you both, and I'll start with you, John, but what messaging can pharmacists use to encourage patients to get all of their recommended doses of the COVID-19 vaccine? I know, personally, my younger brother took the first dose and the second dose, had to push him a little bit, but my goodness, it was so difficult to try to get him to get the booster. And it was like, just get it. I literally had to practically drive him, throw him in the car and take him. He wasn't he's not a vaccine hesitant guy. He got the first two, but for whatever reason, that third one took a little bit more convincing, but I wasn't going to let up on him until he did it. But what can you offer to encourage people?
So I think a lot of us have realized something that I've been saying for a long time. Vaccination delivery is 10% immunology and 90% sociology or anthropology. We're all learning how people tick. And so how do you get people to go to the dentist? How do you get people to get those booster doses? And it's to remind them that it's wearing off. That you have to keep the umbrella up. Whatever analogies you want to use, but it's not once and done. It's something that you have to work at maintaining your fitness. You need to work at maintaining your immunity, and it's and then reminders and I think what will. So the other piece is that lots and hundreds of millions of Americans have suddenly started paying attention to vaccines like they had not been before, and so we can use flu shot season to catch them up. It's going to be a while till that cycle is around again. But how about their birth month? How about every quarter you have a vaccination month or something in your pharmacy that looks at the full menu of things they need: Zoster, HPV, pneumo, flu, Hep B, a whole tens of millions of Americans now ought to get a hepatitis B vaccination series. So it's blending it all together and pulling them in and tapping people on the shoulder repeatedly until they do it.
Yeah, I agree with that. How about you, Stephen? Any words of wisdom?
It's a very difficult situation, as John mentioned. Not only does the fact that now we're in flu season, but we didn't have a flu season this year or little one, and so 2 years in a row. So now we don't need it anymore. I mean, it's just a very difficult situation. One of the things I think would be worth mentioning to the patients is that our immune systems, our immune response to the respiratory viruses are different from some of the other viruses. With measles, for example, as a single series may provide coverage for life. This does not occur with respiratory viruses. We're not able to induce the sterilizing immunity that they talk about. Also, there's many different respiratory viruses. There's flu, COVID, RSV, parainfluenza, many others. And they all have different mechanisms that cause different symptoms of disease. Some affect the upper respiratory tract, some affect lower. So they're different, is the point made. And then on top of that, we're different. We have different health conditions. We have a different immune status. We can't predict our response to vaccines, and none of them provide 100% protection. I think the one statement that we probably can say, though, is that vaccine immunity is usually more protective than natural disease immunity. But again, this is something that's also difficult to assess. So explain to people that the vaccines work. The vaccines are there to protect them. Yes, it's not going to protect them against getting a disease, but it will be milder. We've used that for years with flu. Same kind of status with that. So maybe if they just understand that this is not something that we can totally prevent, maybe that will help with it too.
Yeah, no, that's important. On social media, not that long ago, I posted something the CDC posted. It was about how there's still time to get your flu vaccine because so many people didn't see the flu season as dramatically this year, probably because of the other measures that we've taken. But I ended up actually receiving a number of questions from people like, oh, should I still be getting my flu vaccine? And when is flu season over? Is there still time? So even just a simple message like that can just trigger a reminder for people on something that they might have not done or just simply forgotten because they've been overwhelmed with more COVID-related vaccine information rather than their catch-up information on other vaccines. The other thing, the shingles vaccine, that's just been something for some reason, I've had a lot of people around me who've been experiencing shingles lately. So I've used that as a good opportunity to remind people about how important it is to get that vaccine and remind their friends and family. So many opportunities to do education. I almost have a talk track about vaccines wherever I am at and wherever I go, just to remind people how important these are for public health.
And the other thing to remember is we've got new vaccines on the horizon, particularly an RSV vaccine may be pretty close, which is the same season as all these other vaccines. So it's going to be more difficult as time goes on to try to add vaccines with all this. So we've got challenges.
So I know we're at 1:30, and I just wanted to address a couple of the questions that are coming in. So please feel free to add any comments or questions, but one is going to relate back to what you spoke about, Stephen, around boosters, or either John or Stephen can answer this, but the question is, how long after testing positive for COVID-19 do you recommend a patient receive the booster if they have yet to do so?
I'll let you take that one.
There's no precise number. There's no official right number.
See, I got tired of saying no. There's no answer to this, so I figured wow.
No, because I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm going to just be clear. And that, by the way, that question came in from Lakeisha Butler, and I was just looking at her webinar archives on the Vaccine Confident website, and I thought that was a really great talk that she and a partner gave. But anyway, hi, Lakeisha. So the infection is an immunizing event, and people develop antibodies in an immune response after in response to the infection itself. So it's sort of like how fast after zoster should I get zoster vaccine? You want to let the ripples in the ponds die down. That I say a couple months or a few months. A few. It's not like there's a two there. It's a few months, two-ish. I'd wait at least a couple months, but it's my opinion.
Very good. And I know, Steve, you were going to talk about what other vaccines adults need aside from the COVID-19 vaccine. I know you have a slide on that.
I think the slide is just the immunization schedule, and it just as a reminder for people to look at it. I mean, we have influenza, as you remember. We have pneumococcal. By the way, pneumococcal got new recommendations coming out with the 2 new vaccines, pneumococcal vaccines. Hepatitis B is now universal. Zoster is now for for the immunocompromised. Again, we got Tdap that people are behind, as we mentioned, or TD, and travel vaccines. So I mean, we still have a lot of vaccines that are to be pressed. So go to the schedule and see. Don't ignore these other vaccines because of COVID. I'd hate to see a lot of these other infectious diseases come back.
Yeah, I agree. So this March marks 2 years since we've had the pandemic. Can each of you reflect on what you have learned, what we have learned, and what we can expect moving forward? So I'll start with you, John.
America's paid attention to vaccines. Your clientele, your patients are thinking about adult vaccination where many of them were ignoring it previously. And so you've got a ripe audience to go advocate with, teach, motivate, inspire to get vaccination, and get them thinking in the long term, not just, the pandemic's almost over. No, where we want to keep you healthy. This is a wellness piece, and that's where I want to see us stay. Take advantage. Never let a crisis go to waste. We've just been through an incredible teaching event, and let's capitalize on it going forward.
And how about you, Steve? Any thoughts on this?
Pharmacists have performed in an incredible manner throughout this whole pandemic. They announced at an ACIP meeting that 77% of all COVID vaccines have been administered by pharmacists. It's been extremely stressful, and in many cases, it's unrewarding. But I want you to know that this pandemic response could not have been accomplished without the efforts of pharmacists throughout there. And we may actually see pharmacy practice change because of this. As we get more things such as mail order, automation, platforms we may not even know about, our practice is going to change. Maybe it will evolve into more of a public health preventive medicine approach, especially with the vaccines, more hands-on, more direct patient care. Pharmacists are beneficial to and very important to healthcare in many, many different ways, but we need to remain flexible so that we can figure out where we're going to go in the future.
No, I totally agree. I think this has definitely highlighted how incredible pharmacists are for public health. And hopefully everybody in this country has interacted with a pharmacist in a different way than they've ever had, either through testing or vaccinations or just education information. I know I personally, and I'm sure you did too, received a lot of questions throughout this pandemic about your feelings and thoughts and what needs to happen. Is there anything from what's happened as far as the treatment or anything that you want to see carry forward? Things like enhanced vaccine offerings beyond COVID, appointment-based, experiences, digital health.
One of the learnings for a lot of society was how many services they can, and how much expertise there is in their pharmacy, in their pharmacist, and so the pharmacists are operating under some federal authorities now. If your state authorities are more stringent, and when the federal authorities go away, you want to make sure your legislators and your health department people are aware of all you have contributed to the health of your community, and so that you can get those authorities maintained and expanded.
And the nice part is that patients have now realized that pharmacists are not just a drive-through window anymore. They actually are healthcare providers.
Agree. I can't stress enough how important it is to advocate. I know APhA has been fierce at advocating for retaining the flexibilities offered to the pandemic for recognition. I know we just put out in the last couple of days a letter to the White House with 13 organizations signing on to let pharmacists be able to provide the oral monoclonal antibodies through test to treat. So that's exciting. I love the collaboration that we've had as multiple organizations, and then the whole area around health equity and addressing that we saw and we were witness to during the pandemic. Not that it didn't exist before, but it was highly visible during this experience, and it continues to be the case. So lots of work still to do.
And don't forget just the state capitals. I mean, it's all, this will be a case where eventually the emergency will be declared over. Who knows how long that'll be. At that point, then it's states that regulate healthcare practice acts largely, and so be an advocate, be involved in your state laws.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. I know we have we're going to go into the open forum discussion here because I
as many as they'll sit still for. So fill up their tanks.
Oh, that's a great message.
Now you can go to.
Absolutely. There's always room for vaccinations and for advocating to get people to catch up. Really appreciate both of your information sharing today. I know we have questions that are coming in, so this is the time to share your questions and thoughts. And I want to start with one thought that was great here, not a question, but here it is. This individual would really love for APhA to publish or promote the 77% of COVID vaccines that were administered by pharmacists. It would really help us at the state level to advocate for recognition. And I agree with that. It's really important to highlight how incredibly important we have been for the pandemic. I know I've seen a slide that showed how many vaccines we've administered to people in areas that have had challenges for access. So, and then in children also. So if we can share some of that and maybe have a graphic available where we could share that with legislators, that makes a big difference. So let's start with some of these questions that are coming in. One from Jenny Minchow. Are there recommendations for hepatitis B vaccine boosters?
So far as the fact that if you consider the booster the second shot or third shot of the series, but let's say the vaccine series, whatever happens to be with the particular vaccine that you use. No, the hepatitis B vaccine has been very effective. And the reason that they made the universal recommendation now is because of the fact that we plateaued. So, and so that the plateau has been occurred because of the people not getting the vaccine, not because of people titers wearing out. In fact, the vaccine group that's gotten vaccines at birth is still basically zero disease in that age group. So there's no, so far, and they still watch it, but so far, no, we do not need to redo the vaccine.
Very good. All right. And let's see, it says, with all of the COVID vaccines available, why introduce a new vaccine that might lead to further doubt by the public?
Well, so different companies took their products through the pipeline at different speeds. And, we were incredibly lucky to have the mRNA vaccines available in December of 2020. There's a whole variety of products that are still working their way through the pipeline. And your tax dollars have paid a bunch of the work for all of these early ones, and Novavax too. So society is not monolithic. The anti-vaccine group is not monolithic. It's not a group. Why don't people want to be vaccinated? Well, it's a pie chart of reasons with lots of different slices. And so some folks, what I see in press stories is people waiting for a route, a standard approach product being available. I don't suspect that that's all that big a slice, but that we need to let all the candidates work their way through the pipeline. We don't know which of these is going to be the most durable. That's at a 5 or 10 year time horizon. So we don't know that yet. So that's why we let them all go through, or all the ones that earn license.
And if we find newer vaccines, for example, if we can find a universal vaccine for flu, it might not need to be given every year. It might be every 3 years, or they might make combination vaccines with these type of vaccines that you might get a seasonal shot that will have COVID, flu, RSV, whatever it happens to be. So this is where the progress goes on with time.
Very good. Thank you. And I was going to say, some people were not comfortable with mRNA for whatever reason. If this provides the comfort they need to get the vaccine, I'm all for it. So, right. But I liked what you said, it's a normal process. There's a question here, and it says, any updates on COVID-19 vaccine for children less than 5 years? Also, any updates on COVID-19 fourth dose?
So the vaccination for kids under 5, there was that big flurry maybe a month ago of, we're almost going to get it. We'll get it on Tuesday or something like that. It turns out that folks took their time and looked at the detail and said, maybe we don't have the dose right. And so they've sort of gone back to the not to the drawing board, but they've gone back to reassess and figure out what the proper dose for really little kids is. And so that's going to take some time to work that through. Fortunately, we're back in a trough of disease incidence. So let's hope that this is a long duration trough. And the fourth dose, so how long will these vaccines last? How durable is the immunity induced by the current schedule? We don't know. We have to wait. Time has to elapse to know that. Steve, you want to add anything?
And what level of protection? I mean, with flu, we don't have that high a level of protection every year, so we don't know what level of protection we need for the.
And we haven't said yet, the vaccines we have now are doing a wonderful job at preventing hospitalization and death, and that's the most important thing. And okay, if you can get a symptomatic infection, but you can treat it at home, that's unfortunate, but it's not hospitalization and death, and the vaccines are protecting against that.
Very good. Well, I think that wraps up the questions that I'm seeing here. But let me just thank you both for your insights today. It's really been truly fitting to have you both end on our 61st webinar in addressing the COVID-19 crisis open forum series. So 61 altogether in the last 2 years. And like I mentioned earlier, you both have been the frequent flyers of this program, always providing the audience with the most accurate, timely, and practical vaccine information. So we can't thank you enough for all the volunteering, the time, the dedication to making sure that pharmacists have the most up-to-date information needed for patients. And NBC News may have their weekly news show, Meet the Press, but we are honored to have our own Meet the Pharmacy Press with John and Steve and Lisa and Dan and Mike. We all have some special mugs for you as a memento of your outstanding contributions. So these will be arriving to you, and hopefully you can cherish them and remember the 61, times or consults and your actual appearances. I mentioned earlier that when Saturday Night Live has 5 or more hosts, you get a little jacket. We should incorporate that into this and give you a badge for all the times that you've attended and helped us out. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I know we'll be seeing more of you because this vaccine thing always happens. It's a year-round process. So thank you both.
We'll see you in San Antonio.
That sounds great. Thank you. Very good. So what we'll do now is we are going to jump over to review APHA's activities and what's coming. And so I have Mike Baxter, who's going to give us the advocacy update. Mike?
Sure, great. Thanks, Sandra. Well, as folks can see on the slide today, as you probably heard last week, if you listened to the President's State of the Union address, when the word pharmacist got mentioned, everybody's ears peaked up. We paid attention. The President announced a new test to treat initiative. That's where you can actually have a one-stop shop where someone can come in and get COVID tested and get the treatment there for the oral therapeutics right on site. So we're really excited at the beginning of it, but of course, the devil's in the details. So we want to find out more about the program itself. When they actually announced the details of the program, it's really limited. And it's only limited to certain pharmacies and certain sites, sites that actually have healthcare clinics attached to them. And they actually specify in more of the details for the program that it's dealing more with non-pharmacist prescribers. So even though we have the authority, the federal authority granted from HHS under the 9th Amendment to the PrEP Act Declaration to order and administer the COVID-19 oral therapeutics, we're still held back by the emergency use authorization for the 2 products that are available right now. That specifically says that pharmacists cannot be included as prescribers for ordering and administering the oral therapeutics. So there's a lot of concern about access there. So when this initiative was announced, we kind of bonded together the pharmacy community as one. We're always stronger together. And you can see, obviously, that we were one of, I think, 13 other organizations, so 14 in total, that wrote a letter to the President specifying that we really need to lift those barriers on the emergency use authorizations in the FDA, from the FDA for the 2 oral therapeutic products, to really kind of maximize the use of pharmacists and really to get these products to the people who need them most in rural and underserved communities where the pharmacy may be the only healthcare provider for miles. We want to make sure that obviously all the tools are available to us, obviously, and have that one-stop shop for COVID-19 testing to treating the patients who need it the most. So that's linked here on this webpage. Also did want to just touch on briefly, John mentioned it before, what's going to be happening if these temporary authorities that pharmacists have go away. So it's a good question. And most recently, actually, the president did renew the national health emergency. That's step one. Step two is when the HHS secretary then extends the public health declaration. That was actually most recently extended. So it's going to be expiring on April the 15th. So we really have to watch on the 15th to see what happens if it keeps going there. But we have heard, and you probably heard from a number of media outlets as well, that it may end sooner than that. So you see a lot of the restrictions coming back, a lot of temporary authorities in different places are changing. So we really have to watch that, because if it does get repealed, even though the pharmacist authorities are kind of independent of these declarations, they can go to October of 2024 currently. The HHS secretary could end them anytime sooner than that once the public health emergency is over. So we're really watching that. We've actually been talking directly with the HHS secretary, and we've really determined that there really needs to be a legislative solution for a permanent solution to this. And you saw recently, I think, with our Future of Pharmacy Coalition was announced. So I want to make sure that folks are staying tuned. So you'll find out more information shortly on that avenue. In addition, I did want to mention as well, for the COVID-19 vaccination specifically, as you know, you're getting a $40 administration fee per shot. That's actually going to be changing. That's already been announced by Medicare for next year in the most recent final rule. So that'll be changing from a $40 administration fee to a $30 administration fee, similar to other vaccines that are out there. So to get folks ready for that. Obviously, that could change. Obviously, we have to watch the variants coming out. So there could be some modifications of that going forward. And now I'm going to give a quick update on some things on the website. If we go to the next slide. And to help me do that, I'm going to bring in Ann Burns, though, for some breaking news. Ann, are you on the line?
I am on the line, Mike. And Sandra, this is a surprise for you. I'm for our audience. For our audience, this is Sandra's last webinar to moderate as APHA's president. And so we'd like to take this opportunity to recognize you for supreme excellence in moderating the COVID-19 webinar series over the past year. Few of you probably know and understand the significant time commitment of being an APHA presidential officer. Serving in this role is really almost more than a full-time job. So we were really blessed over the past year for Sandra's dedication and commitment to this webinar series. And as anyone, including today, who has participated in this webinar series knows, Sandra is a passionate advocate for pharmacists and a noted expert on so many key pharmacy issues we have covered in this series. Sandra, your moderating skills are superb. And I was thinking today that you're such a natural. You have a wonderful way of making speakers and webinar participants feel right at home. So on behalf of APHA, I'm pleased to present you with our Golden Microphone Award for Excellence in Moderating. Thank you for your outstanding contributions over the past year. I know you'll be back in the future as a guest moderator, but for right now, we just are so appreciative of everything you've done this year.
Well, this was quite a surprise. I'm like, I'm gonna invite Cresta to come here because she's like, I'm giving a webinar. I always would tell her, don't come in. So I'm like, what's going on? So thank you so much. This is really incredibly meaningful to me, and especially on this topic, which I've always had a passion for, which is vaccines and public health and preventative health. So I really appreciate this very, very much. Definitely an unexpected surprise to receive it. So thank you so much.
And we're getting comments from the audience that you're a rock star, supreme excellence. So we all agree. So now I'll turn it back over to you for the part of the webinar you thought you were doing.
Well, Well, great. So I am going to jump into annual meeting promotion. So we have our first annual, not our first, but our next annual meeting live, which is very exciting. We are excited to be traveling to San Antonio next week. Hopefully we'll see some of you there, and really excited to actually get together again as a pharmacy family. So that is coming up. Hopefully you've received your information, you've booked your flight, and it will be a very, very fun time. Lots of catching up to do there for sure. And we are going to announce a change in the webinar format. So today I'd like to announce that this will be our very last webinar in the COVID-19 webinar series, unless things change, hopefully not, but we can talk. We can't thank you enough for tuning in, sharing your stories, your insights, your questions and challenges along the way. These webinars have been exceptionally powerful at sharing the pharmacist stories across the country and the work that has been done to really help patients out. We've had some incredibly pressing issues facing the profession, and I'm pleased to share that in the coming weeks we will be announcing the launch of a new revamped monthly open forum webinar series that will feature expert panelists covering a broad range of timely topics and policy issues beyond COVID-19. And as always, you will have the opportunity to ask questions, share your stories. I can't thank enough the people that have participated. Some of you who are here as attendees, you've been just contributors to this. I can't thank you enough. And I also want to welcome APHA's incoming president, Teresa Toll, who will be your moderator for this webinar. I also want to say that my first hosting opportunity here, it was the day I actually received one of the COVID vaccines. I was part of one of the COVID studies. And if you go back and look, and I think it was a January 28th webinar, I was completely panicked about having to host it when I had just received the vaccine. How far we have come. So thank you all. It's been a pleasure to be your host here and moderator, and I hope I can continue to come back either as a guest or pinch hit if needed. Again, thank you so much for your participation in today's webinar. This webinar and the other 60 in our series can be accessed on the website and on our YouTube channel, so you can see them there. You can access them at any time. And I'd really like to take this time to thank all of you, the staff, and thank you so much. It's been great working with you in this capacity. Meg, thank you. Elisa, Mike, Mitch, Dan, gosh, I can't think of everybody. So many people that have helped put this together, but I can't thank you enough for all of your commitment to pharmacists and to our profession. And I am a proud member of APHA. I will be a proud past president of APHA, and I'm passing the baton to all of you to keep advocating for the good work that we do. Thank you.